Peru, my warmest congratulations on your election to preside over the General Assembly. Your wealth of diplomatic experience and your commitment to environmental issues will contribute, I'm convinced of it, to the success of our work. Moreover, I wish to greet and thank the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, for his initiatives to promote a more efficient and fairer global governance. I also wish to thank him for his diligent work in a turbulent world indeed, which calls for strong leadership. The international situation is complex, difficult, and delicate. Strategic balances are shifting, and our peoples are observing with worry and concern the disintegration of peace, the disintegration of the environment, and the worsening of the international economic situation. The world is moving dangerously towards situations which will see clashes and interests pitted one against the other. These situations are creating grave tension at unprecedented historic levels. Peru reaffirms its staunch position of defending the principle of non-aggression and its position of respecting the territorial integrity of states. We reiterate that the Russian Federation's intervention in Ukraine is illegitimate. Moreover, we condemn the persistent occupation by Israel of Palestinian and Arab territories since 1967. Achieving peace rules out any selectivity in the application of the United Nations Charter. All armed interventions violate the Charter. There are not good and bad interventions. Moreover, all types of sanctions other than those adopted by the Security Council as part of its action to preserve peace and security are illegitimate and run counter to international law. Any other types of unilateral sanction are illegitimate and again run counter to international law. This includes economic sanctions. Once wars or aggressions have occurred, the duty of the international community is to work to ensure a ceasefire and the resolution of conflicts through peaceful means, and this through diplomatic negotiations. We must not provide incentives for conflict. We must make peace our mission. Consequently, Peru once again reiterates the need for a ceasefire to be agreed in Ukraine. We must see increased protection of civilian society affected by conflict, and negotiations to find a peaceful solution must begin. This solution must take account of the interests of all parties. At the same time, it is crucial that we ensure the continuity of the agreement which allows the export of grain from Ukraine, and as has been indicated by the Secretary General, arrangements must be made to normalize Russian exports of fertilizers, the absence of which is suffocating the poorest farmers of the developing world. It is vital to avoid a situation whereby economic sanctions affect food security. This is ultimately a problem which is inextricably linked to the respect of the human right to food. As far as the situation in Palestine is concerned, its territories have seen a spike in violence a few months ago. Here, it is vital too that the international community shoulders once and for all its responsibilities, and that it enables peace negotiations to ultimately find a solution based on the recognition of two states, an independent and viable Palestine and an Israel with secure borders. It is only thus that we will have a lasting peace. The government of Peru will soon open diplomatic representation in Palestine, a step fully in line with the principle of the universality of diplomatic relations. Mr. President, in a context of instability and the weakening of diplomatic consensuses and negotiations, in order to transform hotbeds of conflict into arenas where peace can be built, we must take a leap forward to ultimately strengthen and expand peacekeeping operations of the United Nations. On my government's instruction, Peru has practically doubled its military troops in 6 peacekeeping missions throughout the world. And we are particularly present in bringing peace and stability to the Central African Republic. We will also shortly contribute police personnel to peacekeeping operations. Only a few days ago, I opened in Lima the first conference of Latin America and the Caribbean on peacekeeping operations, entitled Living in Peace. The conference has lent great momentum to increasing the participation of Latin America and the Caribbean in United Nations peacekeeping operations, and this step is grounded in the principles of the consent of the parties, impartiality, and the non-use of force except in self-defense. Yet more important still, the Lima Conference has decided to create the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Cooperation in Peacekeeping Operations. Peru is committed to the immediate implementation and operationalization of the network. Latin America was decisive in the very creation of the United Nations. Grounded in the principles of solidarity and joint action, Latin America must as such increase its contribution to conflict resolution and peace. It is indeed its historic tradition. In this vein, my government will increase consultations to strengthen South America as a zone of international peace. However, peace is not only broken by way of armed action, as is stated in the preambular part of UNESCO's constitution. Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defences of peace must be constructed. We must build in the minds of men the values of peace, and that involves respecting others, protecting human rights, not exploiting the weakest among us, promoting dialogue, and promoting the peaceful resolution of conflict. But ensuring peace involves rooting out ideologies of hate. This is something that the United Nations systematically does with the ongoing support of Peru. Racism, intolerance, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, all of these must be rooted out. Peace involves an awareness of the common destiny of humankind. Acting with a sense of responsibility to build this common future involves respecting the principle of non-intervention, and at the same time it involves showing solidarity towards the poor and the weak, towards the dispossessed, towards the vulnerable. Acting with responsibility to build this common future involves respecting human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights, and cultural rights. And, moreover, the collective rights of peoples, the rights of indigenous persons. The state has a duty to guarantee individual freedom. However, guaranteeing the enjoyment of social rights essential for human dignity, such as the human right to education, the human right to healthcare, the human right to housing, the human right to water, the human right to food, to a decent wage, is also vital. And thanks to this General Assembly, we can and now must guarantee the human right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. Building peace also involves fulfilling the mandate to resolve the as yet unresolved situation of colonial territories and peoples. Peru fought for its independence at the beginning of the 19th century, driven by the principle of the self-determinations of peoples. As such, since 1947, its diplomatic efforts have supported and continue to staunchly support the access to independence and self-determination of territories and peoples that are under the United Nations mandate to ultimately access their independence. Peru has restored diplomatic relations with the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and firmly supports its right to self-determination. We extend our broadest support to the endeavours that the Secretary-General's representative must undertake to re-establish the ceasefire in the Western Sahara, and the endeavours he will undertake to bring about a negotiated and peaceful solution. Bolstered by this same belief, Peru fully recognises the rights of sovereignty of the Argentine Republic over the Malvinas Islands, and we call upon parties to begin consultations and negotiations to give tangible form to this pressing goal and to ensure it is achieved. Mr. President, the international economic situation is becoming critical. The negative effects of the pandemic on productive processes, and particularly on worsening living conditions of the poor and very poor majorities, as well as problems when it comes to regularizing supply chains, inflations and spikes in energy prices are producing a grave crisis of global proportions, which will only produce more poverty and more exclusion. Global growth indicators are not encouraging. On the contrary, global growth is showing a downward trend. Latin America is suffering the negative impacts of inflation, of a contraction in economic growth, and of difficulties to restore the downward trend in poverty and extreme poverty that was seen before the pandemic.